episode 184 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from Wild Insider, OutDPS, and Call to Auction.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
Arth can't be with us today. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I'm Alexander with our first glitch of the day. Carry on.
You go. Take a drink. Arth can't be with us today because he's getting his hair done.
Is that right?
That's what I heard.
Well, we'll need to see like a photo, the before and after, just to see what kind of fluff job he's coming back with.
Good times.
He'll get a perm or something. Do people still do that? I have no idea.
Usually not, but I'm imagining something more like Flock of Seagulls. Like bald patch in the back.
There you go.
Take care of your wrist hair is very important. He's taking over Frosttime's role.
That is true.
That's right. Before too long, he will be the new Frost. Oh, God.
Poor bastard.
Well, today is...
moderator.
Yes, right.
You first. Today is Saturday, August 31st, 2013. If you want to participate in the chat room, we'll just keep doing this all day long. Our lovely moderator, as always, is me, Alexander. I will rank your questions by... I have no clue.
You didn't think this through. You didn't think this
I did not think this through. You guys think of something really cool.
Yeah, what kind of hairstyle do you think Arth is going to come back with? That's what I want to know. You know, is he going to have a mullet or what? I'd like to get your input on that.
I'm thinking like new Star Wars rat tail or dreadlocks, maybe dreadlocks.
Dreadlocks would be good.
Original Star Trek con rat tail.
You can send your questions in to me in a private message by left-clicking my name, Alexander, in the right section of the chat room. And if you're not in the chat room, then totally ignore the past minute.
So we don't have a guest this week, but as an announcement, next week is going to be the final episode before the release of Patch 5.4, and we are pleased to announce that Zahara will be joining us. Zahara, as you may or may not know, is the person in charge of FemaleDwarf.com, the best website on the internet. Is that selling us a little too much? I don't know. I mean, FemaleDwarf.com.
I don't think you can oversell Zahara, especially now that Frost is gone, and so she's like our main source of like, tell us what to do, what spec, what DPS, how are things shaping up. So she should have a lot of good information for us, and we'll find out about what changes she's made to her tool. The FemaleDwarf.com since we last spoke. I think she's done with wholesale changes until like the next expansion, of course. But there's always tweaks and things like that, and especially all that RPPM stuff with the trinkets. I'm sure that just it's gonna causes her all sorts of headaches. But yeah, it'd be great to have her back on, and like I said, kind of see where some of the specs and what the patch 5.4 changes are really shaping up to be, before we start the new raid season the following Tuesday. So yeah, be sure and tune in for that.
In case anybody doesn't know, by the way, FemaleDwarf.com is a website where you can go and import your hunter from the armory and then calculate your DPS and, of course, make some changes and see whether it gets better or worse. So it's a good way to test out, which upgrade is better or what gear do you want, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a great tool. I mean, I think she started it back in 2009, with Wrath of the Lich King, and she's thankfully continued to play the game and maintain the site. But it's just a great simulator. Should have all the gear for patch 5.0 probably already programmed in there, so you could actually put together the best in slot gear lists and just do all sorts of simulations with that and see what rotations work well and what doesn't. Yeah, it really is a great tool.
Now, I see on the items here of the announcements, we have something called Hunter Week starting on Monday.
I think this was started by old listener Leylawin, who goes as like Kinlay on Twitter. And this kind of started out in the Hunter, or not the Hunter, but the WoW blogosphere, where they were doing alt appreciation weeks. And the first week was Death Knights, and I think last week was Druid. And I think starting Monday, they're going to do Hunter. So it'll be Hunter, and they're trying to see, which alts and which classes people sort of like the most or come out and represent the most. So this is a good opportunity if you're a Hunter blogger or just on Twitter or something like that and want to, people are sort of blogging about alts that they have that are, whatever class of the week. So if they have a Death Knight, they're writing about their Death Knight alts and Druid alts.
So what you're saying is we are hereby formally asking all of our listeners to go blow the barn doors off and just talk about Hunters on Monday?
Absolutely, this is it. This is sort of Hunter Week, Hunter Appreciation Week, Hunter Pride Week, whatever you want to call it. And luckily,
it doesn't even have to be your alt. Although if you're somebody like Darkbrew and your alt happens to be a hunter as well,
yeah,
then
it's easy for me.
just...
I can talk about the main. I can talk about my 2 Hunter alts. Although I have not really played them much in Mists of Pandaria, I have to say. But that doesn't mean they don't exist.
There you go.
But yes, I do have my 3 Hunters.
It
would be good to give me something to write about anyway. So so it's just a fun thing that I think she started up a couple weeks back, and so there you go. So Hunters are up next, and that'll probably end it because I think after Hunters go, what's the point of continuing on
We're
after
just
that?
gonna be like, what is the sum of all other class appreciation days put together times 2, and that's Hunters. That's at least what I expect.
Exactly, pretty much.
So in the news this week, you want to take us through some of these?
Yeah, so since we last came on, there was another round of PTR changes, and they tweaked some of the Hunter numbers, all in the upward direction, by the way. So we got some more buffs going into 5.4, which is awesome. The first one was kill command damage has been increased by 34% now, which was about up from, I think it was 15% with the last PTR build, so now it's going to be at 34% damage increase, which is pretty significant.
Did they say increased by? I think they might have been increased to.
Maybe. Well, I'll have to go see. Now you have to make me go look as we.
Well, because we've got like 4 overall buffs here, like kill shot, aim shot, explosive shot, and Lynx Rush. So basically the 3 signatures plus Lynx Rush. Overall, it's a pretty big buff, but it looks like they're all going up, not quite equally, but it seems like this is them trying to tune a little bit, fine-tune the difference in damage between the 3 specs. Like aim shot here is 450% from 400% now. So that's quite a significant buff, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the official patch notes, this is on the World of Warcraft site, says kill command damage has been increased by 34%.
I thought so. I think what they mean is increased. Well, up from 15% is what they had before.
In other words, like the previous patch note said, kill command damage increased by 15%, I believe.
Oh, okay. So this really is by. Okay.
Yeah, it is by. So the damage is increasing by 34%, and same thing with aim shot. Now deals 450% ranged weapon damage, and their notes say up from 350, but I said like the last PTR build was 400.
Okay.
And then same thing with explosive shot damage, increased by 27%.
Yeah. And it's 350 on live right now, right?
I believe so, for aim shot, yeah.
So that's about a 30%. Yeah, okay, so these are all kind of within same range of each other. So the fact that they're fine-tuning it at this level means that they must feel that at a certain gear level our specs are now competitive. That's every time they do a nice little change like this, they're typically trying to accomplish something like that. And of course, Lynx Rush is 30% up across the board.
Yeah, and that one needed it because I think they've touched the other talents on that tier. Murderer Crow's got a pretty significant buff, 40% buff in this patch.
Yeah.
And then of course we had Blink Strikes, which was I don't think altered for 5.4, but previously it was turned into the passive ability.
Yeah, and Blink Strike, as far as I know, is what everybody's taking. I suspect that it's probably doing too much for a passive ability. I kind of like Link's Rush. I like the fact that it's not, a single button that does a single damage. It's something you have to control, and if you're doing AoE, you don't do it. And, I kind of liked it back in the day when it was really just a flurry of massive damage. But now even just the bleed effect is kind of nice. You get a Link's Rush off on your target, and, bleeds are always good.
Yeah, no, it's a nice ability. I think Murderer Crows will probably continue to be sort of the go-to ability on that tier moving forward. But
in 5.4, you mean?
In 5.4, yeah.
Yeah. So.
But Crows is one of those interesting abilities because it's kind of got that one aspect of it, whereas if you can get it off on a target that's 20% health or below. The cooldown is cut in half, so it's only like a 1-minute cooldown versus the normal cooldown. But the dot effect of it lasts for 30 seconds, so it's hard to tell if something with 20% health is actually going to live 30 seconds. You know what I mean? And are you going to really get to take advantage of it?
Well, an average fight is going to be 5 minutes. That's what 5 or 6 minutes is what we've been theory crafting around for the longest time. But it's not necessarily a single target, right? What I think that might mean is if you happen to have it up and there's an ad that's about to go down, you can throw it on the ad so long as you know you're going to get your full, your full damage out of it, and then know that it'll be available, sooner because of the fact that you threw it on the ad at the end.
Yeah, like that first fight in the Terrace of the Endless Spring where you had the three bosses essentially. That was a good fight to try and use crows in that way, where you could get one down to 20%, and hopefully it was off cooldown, and you could pop it there, and that was a fight where you could certainly take advantage of it. So I think it's, like you said, beneficial for multi-target fights, and certainly where one of the targets are almost like a boss level, where you might have 30 seconds of it being alive with 20% health or below.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go through some of the other news here. There was a blue post by the looks of it. I'm not sure who made this, but
I think it was Lore on the forums. It wasn't Ghostcrawler. It was somebody else.
Okay. Well,
in response to and this was in response to the current PTR.
Okay, in the current PTR. So what he said is, hey folks, over the last few days, we've identified a glitch that was causing the time since last change to proc counter of the RPPM mechanics reset unnecessarily. I'll paraphrase here, or I'll summarize here. This was resulting in a much lower than intended proc rate for RPPM effects on the PTR. They have applied a hotfix, and now RPPM trinkets and other effects like them should be activating more regularly again on the PTR. And he clarified one last time, this is only on the PTR, not on live servers.
Right, and so obviously it's going to work properly on the live servers, but if you're someone that's been doing testing of these things, trying to figure out the math and the theory crafting, this is the kind of thing that could actually wreak a little havoc with your results,
Yeah, for sure. It's also the kind of thing SimCraft wouldn't take into account, and if they hadn't caught this bug, it might have ended up being pretty annoying in live.
That's true. Yeah, it would have been awful.
Yeah. So do you want to take us through some of these blue posts, maybe?
Yeah, let's go ahead. There's some, there was some good, almost like a Q&A. I mean, where they actually responded to some concerns and things about changes they made for patch 5.4. So one of them, someone wrote, that this first set was sort of, people were sort of questioning whether or not, Blizzard did what they said they were going to do and really, achieve their goals. And I think the person sort of had some doubts that Blizzard actually, did what they set out to do, which I don't know that I would agree with. But the first thing he said was that there would be compensation for the removal of readiness. Can you clarify? And they responded, we've already made all of the adjustments we had planned in the wake of the readiness nerf. Yes, this means that you'll be less effective in certain situations, such as BM burst and arenas. That was the point.
Now, that's an interesting quote right there. I think he was answering the wrong question. It sounds like whoever was complaining, I shouldn't necessarily say this for certain, but they may have been complaining, as a raiding hunter, now that I don't have readiness, what can you do? If that is the case, then just the fact that you can use in PvE, you get four times damage multiplier on your Stampede is probably what I would consider the repayment for losing readiness, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, the fact that you have charges on the abilities that you most commonly readiness to get back is another one.
Yeah, they gave us those charges. I mean, they buffed up most of the signature shots, so that we can talk about marksman at some point. It's interesting to see that Chimera shot. A lot of people sort of complained that Chimera shot was left alone. That of all the abilities, and they were sort of curious to suggest why was Chimera shot not buffed in any way and just left as is, since that was sort of viewed as the signature shot for marksman, and they chose to go with aimed shot instead.
Well, you do get a lot of aim shots, right? You get your procs and you hard cast them whenever you get a chance or whenever it makes sense, especially now that it's doing so much damage. It might be worth it.
Yep, I mean, you do. There's what is it? The not steady focus, but there is careful aim. Well, careful aim, it does more damage. The crit chance is increased within that window, and then I think the master marksman talent as well builds up, and yes, you do get instant it turns aim shot into an instant cast ability at that point. So obviously you want to fire it, and I believe it removes the focus cost as well, if I understand it, remember it correctly.
Yep. So the second item here is, and it looks like this is just a big laundry list. So somebody wrote, it was acknowledged that Hunter DPS was low and that this would be specifically addressed. And the blue response was, we're still monitoring performance and tuning, and that will continue. It's important to remember that changes to the other classes will have an effect on where you stand in overall performance. Comparing a 5.4 PTR Hunter to, for example, a 5.3 Fire Mage would be silly, as Fire has been brought down considerably. And I would almost go as far to say, comparing a 5.4 PTR Hunter to a 5.3 Live Hunter, you can expect to see an increase in damage. So the only question is whether that's going to be enough of an increase, or I should say, once we're into 5.4 with the gear we're going to be using to compare different DPS classes and specs, how are Hunters doing? It sounds like they've been tuning us up a few times, and they've been tuning everybody else down a little bit to try and get rid of the outliers. So hopefully this will end up with us either at or near the top.
Yeah, and that's the goal. I mean, either way, like I said, they felt like we were doing more damage than we currently are, which is, say, if you were to log into the game, day one of patch 5.4 with the exact gear you're wearing now and go to your target dummy, you would hopefully see, an increase in your performance and output from where you were just the day before. And like I said, it's not just buffing our own abilities. They have nerfed some of the other classes a bit. So hopefully that together combined, will increase our overall DPS. Plus, I mean, I know losing readiness is a nerf in many ways, but they've tried to compensate for that, and it does simplify some of the choices in the DPS rotations a little bit. And I don't think you can discount that too much. That if you go in there with a simpler rotation than what you have now, it's going to be easier for you to play. And you might just do a little bit better based on that alone too. So there's a lot of variables that sort of go into measuring how much DPS that you do.
That's one of the things that I'm not personally as happy with. I've always felt that things that exist that if you're really good you can take advantage of and do extraordinary things with, versus things that make it so that more of that increase the average by making more people who can't do that kind of stuff. Like, as a perfect example, we've had times in the past where our rotations were incredibly, complex, and if you were capable of pulling it off, you could do amazing things, but the vast majority of people were only capable of pulling it off. They weren't capable of pulling it, perfection off. They were able to get maybe 70 or 80% to where they could have been if somebody else who really knew what they were doing was playing their account. But because of that, when they simplified things so that it's many more people can execute optimally, then what they do is they raise the average amount of DPS and say, look, now you're doing better compared to other classes. When in reality, the competition at the highest level is not based on how the averages are. They're based on what is the maximum theoretical capability of the class. And that's sort of one of those design tweaks that they've done pretty good balancing historically, and I expect to see an equally good job balancing this time around. At least I hope to see.
Yeah, I hope the balance is better too. Like I said, it's gotten better over time. It's never perfect. But yeah, I don't mind seeing the rotations sort of get simplified just a little bit. I mean, there's been a lot of discussions out there about ability bloat. I mean, where I like to see sort of the skill come into play is in doing all those other things that don't necessarily pertain to DPS and trying to do maximum DPS while maybe having another role or another job within an encounter, such as kiting ads or keeping something pinned down through CC and trapping. And I mean, a lot of those things have sort of been lost to now. They're not as prominent as what they were, but to me, when I think of hunters and skills, those are the types of areas that I would love to see come into play a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true. There's something to be so I guess there's really three then. There's how well the average person does when all they do is focus on damage, and then there's how well the most skilled players do when they're in the same situation, and then there's how well both of those people do when they have another job to do. Your job is to kite these ads while trying to do maximum damage on this boss. That's the kind of thing that I agree with you. I like to see that. So.
Yeah, and I think some of that trapping and things like that has been lost a little bit. Certainly, haven't seen much of it in this expansion. Probably not even that much in Cataclysm.
So the next one here, it was promised, this is a player wrote, it was promised that there would be work done to make significant differentiation between all 3 hunter specs. The answer was, indeed, that's something we are planning on doing. And as I mentioned when I first brought it up, it'll happen after 5.4. Wow.
Yeah, that's a given. I mean, I don't think anyone should have reasonably expected that to happen at the end of an expansion here. Those those are changes that change the way we play our class. And I know they don't want to do too drastic of a change, but even like for example, when we switched over from mana to focus, that was a big deal. They didn't do that in the middle of Wrath of the Lich King. They waited till Cataclysm, so we had a nice long testing period, several months of just testing it before releasing that into the live system. So those are the kind of changes that need a lot of time to simmer and go through several iterations before the release, because they change the look of the class, the feel, how we play, rotations, everything kind of is on the table for modification at that point. So,
you know what? I just had a moment to realize we didn't read out the names in the room today. We got to put that back in the notes for next time. Yeah, and so I know it's been talked about before, but I'm starting to get excited to think what they could really do if they actually sat down and sort of redesigned what each spec is supposed to feel like, and maybe how they play. I mean, there's all kinds of cool opportunities that they have to really differentiate things, but of course it comes at the expense of having to balance it, yet potentially more complex set of abilities.
Yes.
But yeah, okay. Obviously, that's not relevant now, but that's the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to seeing. For the
I'd love to do, and it's definitely worth discussing. Maybe not in full detail today, but at some point, that's going to, because like I said, what could they, and it, because the range of possibilities is pretty big, even from I don't think we want to see hunters be like a hybrid class where we're somehow able to heal, or I mean we already can tank to some degree, but to actually be an official.
Well, we can
class.
Solo tank. We can't tank as well as like a Ret Paladin can. If the tank goes down and somebody has the taunt, it's better to have a plate DPS do it.
Absolutely.
Who has a tanking cooldown than it is your pet. But if that changed, and obviously I suspect that this would come back down to the skill thing. There's controlling a pet well enough to be able to tank with it is a real skill. But I suspect that if they were to make those controls a little bit more intuitive and make sure that people understood within the game, not by reading on Google or whatever, within the game how it's expected that you play your pet as a tank, that would kind of I could, as long as it didn't cost me anything, I'd be happy to see that. Where if it could be done viably, have the hunter quickly swap to a pet that's capable of tanking, and then just have it do that essentially.
Yeah. But like Beast Mastery, it's all about the pets. Something like maybe being able to have 2 pets out at one time, or more abilities that are like Kill Command, for example, where the damage comes from the pet and not necessarily you. I mean, so there's things like that might be cool to see.
Yeah, and I think I like the idea of survival being sort of like the AoE magical damage version of hunters, but it doesn't mesh with the name, because neither AoE nor doing poison type nature type damage really sort of jives with what I think of. If I had never played WoW and you said a survival hunter, what do they do? That's like answering that question could lead you down all kinds of interesting paths, but some of them are really far from what we have now, and I suspect they're not willing to make a drastic change, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, survival, it just sort of makes you think of, hanging out in the woods, like Into the Wild kind of thing, just
problem is you can get really
pitching a tent and trapping furry creatures and stuff,
Yeah. And that's the thing. You know what? I'd be perfectly happy if they were to give us 2 specs that are good, equally good for different situations in raiding, and 1 spec for PvP.
Yep.
And if PvP ended up being, if survival ended up being the PvP spec, that would kind of make sense. Like you're maybe you could be some. Anyways, let's shelve this discussion for a later time. You want to read number 4 here?
Yeah, it says, excuse me, Marksman was to be made viable again, or at least on par with other specs. And when Blizzard came back and said, I haven't said anything along these lines, but keeping similar specs in line with each other is always a goal of ours. That said, players will always tend to gravitate towards whatever the best, quote, best spec happens to be in a given patch cycle, even if the differences are very minor. If survival ends up doing even as little as 2% more damage than marksmanship, I suspect we'll still see many claims that Marks is quote, not viable.
You know, they've used that a few times to, I guess, answer people complaining about spec balance. And I agree in principle that this can happen, but I suspect that in practice, all it takes is for one of the specs to be better at a particular type of job for that no longer to be a factor. Right now we've got BM, which is awesome for certain types of fights, and we have SV, which is awesome for other types of fights. There are no fights that MM is better than either of those. And you're right, if it's even 2% worse than either of those, they'll never see any playtime. What they need to do is they need to find a way so that, even if on a rating target dummy, one spec may sim out to be 2% or test out to be 2% less or 10% less than another spec, they have some sort of advantage. Like maybe against like 5 bosses they can do, or 3 bosses they can do more cleave damage or something, or maybe in a situation like something where you have an opportunity to to do more. Like maybe one of them could be burstier. Maybe it does less damage overall, but you can press a button and kill something. And that's the kind of thing that situational bosses, situational encounters, would make the less quote-unquote optimal or viable spec see some raid time. So, but that said, he's right in the sense that if people are saying MM is not viable, what they mean is that it doesn't do as much damage in any situation as either BM or SV. I don't think that's what he was responding to, though. He was responding to something else.
Yeah, I guess. I think he's probably looking at the fact that too, that the changes to marksman so far didn't seem to be that extreme. Like they needed, and I don't think anyone ever expected that, they would change the balance such that marks would be all of a sudden on top or the desired spec. That's never their goal. And I think they've stated in the past that they don't like to make such big changes that you feel like you're forced to change, from one spec to another all of a sudden, like midway through an expansion. But I guess it begs the question, like, how close do they really have to be before, because they'll never, I don't think they'll ever be, on a target dummy, they'll never be 100% equal, but how close do they really have to be before you sit there and say, okay, I can feel good about playing whatever one I'm better at or whatever one I enjoy the most versus theoretical damage.
That's the problem. It's on the target dummy or on the tank and spank boss or on the boss that has one target that you just have to hammer as hard as you can. On that type of fight, that's what we sim out using Female Dwarf and Simcraft and anything else. That's what we're doing our math based on, because that's the easiest one to do. But the reality is, even though survival sims out to be less than Beast Mastery sometimes, people still use it in fights where they know that there's things you can't sim. Like, hey, I've got 2 targets and I can dump my focus with multi-shot here and do an extra 10% damage, or like, I guess the real problem is here. Pardon me. The real problem here is that we've got multiple types of well, basically we've only really got 2 different types of fights that make a difference for the spec that we choose. It's single target is BM typically, and multi-target is SV typically. Marksman is pardon me, much better at single target than it is at multi-target, has been historically at least. And in that situation, you have to compare it with its competitor for that type of fight, which is BM. And at that point, as long as you've narrowed it down to a single type of fight, there will always be a right answer. It'll either be Marks or BM.
Yep.
So what they need to do is make situations that blur that line a little bit. So if you choose to play in another way, if you get assigned to another task, then all of a sudden, even though your raw damage may be less, you're doing more for the raid. Or maybe your raw damage goes up because you have multiple targets, but you're doing less single target DPS on the boss, Right. That's the kind of thing that they have to balance around. Not this whole idea of which one is better, because you can't just say better without qualifying better at what type of damage.
No, that's a good point. And the other thing to think about, too, now as the game evolves, you have different. It also depends on what it is that you're doing. There's LFR. We've got the new Flex Raid, which I can't wait for. Flex Raid can't get here soon enough, I don't think. But
I think Flex Raid should be normal mode difficulty, to be honest. I feel that Flex Raid should be something that has, all the advantage, the whole flex rate system, just tune it up in damage or difficulty, and then tune it up in rewards so that it replaces what we currently do normal modes on. Because in a lot of medium to small realms, normal modes, obviously hard modes are not possible except unless you're on a big populous realm with the right infrastructure. But on small to medium realms, which is to say most of them, even normal modes can be a challenge sometimes in any 10 or 25.
Yep.
So.
Well, even this expansion, I thought normal modes were probably tuned a little bit higher than what they had been in the past, which was fine. I definitely think flex rate should be closer to normal than LFR. I mean, it should require a coordinated group. You should have to pay attention to all the mechanics that are going on and do all those things and execute them properly, or not expect to win. But I suspect that the overall learning curve will perhaps be less, that they'll be a little bit more forgiving than normal and certainly hard modes.
They also have to make a some sort of, you remember how they put it in that browser that I've never ever seen anyone use ever? They need to make that a place that you can host a site like OpenRaid.
Mm-hmm.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be great. But I guess what I was saying, you have these different levels of difficulty, so the DPS requirements aren't necessarily going to be as stringent either. So,
Yeah.
At some point, it's a game, and you should find ways to have fun and not feel compelled to do, something just because it does the most DPS.
Yeah, I suppose.
But I think there are situations. I think the hard modes, and even to some degree the normal modes, I think that does matter, especially early on when you're under geared for it, and those little bits of DPS and those little things can make actually a big difference.
For sure. All right, let's hit number 5 here. The player comment is our mechanics like pet paving and glitching would be addressed. They expected that. Edit this has been pushed off. I'm not sure who edited it, whether he did or the Blizzard person did. The answer from Blizzard was, I thought it was pretty clear when I brought this up initially. There is no blanket fix to pet paving. The vast majority of the time it has something to do with how an encounter functions or how an environment is built, and nothing to do with pet AI at all. The issues aren't unfixable, but we need to know when and where your pets are struggling. Fix paving doesn't help us or you. Now, both you and I actually program occasionally, and I understand why he's saying this and why it's so frustrating.
Oh yeah, I understand. And what it comes down to this is the program. Any program will tell you, if we can't reproduce your bug, we cannot fix it.
Yep. And also, the pet paving right now on a flat playing field is pretty solid. I mean, as long as if you're just out in Elwyn or something, you've never seen your pet do something stupid. Even if it tries to crawl over one of those little hills or something, it'll do it just fine. The issue is when you get into encounters where they're doing funny things with the ground, like making some of it disappear. What happens to a pet while it's on it? Or what if there's a gap? Can the pet teleport across? Can it jump?
Yeah.
Or does it have to go around the long way? Or what? And if it goes so far, will it disappear? All that kind of stuff. That's not the pet's fault. That's not the pet paving's fault. That's the level designer's fault. And I can tell you, those are two different people. The level designers are not thinking of what's this going to do to the pets, and they should. And every time somebody says, "Oh yeah, my pet dies or disappears every single time on this encounter at this time," well, they typically fix it. I've seen it happen, and I've seen it fixed. If they hear about it and they have time, they fix it. So that would be the answer to pet paving. There is no miracle cure you can do except for allowing pets to just always teleport to whatever you tell them to hit, which, to be honest, they can if you take the right talent. And at that point they become sort of a fuzzy dot. And what's the point of having them exist at all? You just have a literal dot that you put on called whatever you named your pet.
Yeah, and I think it's gotten a lot better over the years. I mean, think those days where I remember you'd be doing a 5-man dungeon and someone would say, "Hey, here we go, let's take this shortcut," and you would, you'd forget to dismiss your pet, and they would go the regular way and bring the entire set of trash that you're trying to avoid along with it.
Yeah. And I've seen that happen, and I remember I went back once and I did it again. I'm like, oh, damn it, I'm about to, I recalled my pet, I told him to stop, and I tried using move 2 to point back to where I came from, and then I looked back and he's sitting right at my feet. In fact, my move 2 had sent him into the pack that we were going to take out next.
Yeah.
So and occasionally they fix it.
Yeah, and I think where the issues people are seeing now is maybe those certain raid encounters where it's like all of a sudden the pet will seem like it's getting stuck somewhere for some reason, and trying to hit a kill command, and it's like it's not going off, and you're like where's my pet? What's he doing?
Yeah.
And that's where it really starts to can get frustrating. And I'm trying to think which encounter this past tier was I saw issues with it. It was I think the Hydra boss where you're just DPSing all those heads. I think I had a couple pet issues there.
You know what I'd like to see? You know how you can put raid markers up that everybody can see, big blue pillars of light or whatever? We should have a very small version of that for our pet and our focus. Because let's be fair, when you're in a raid or a battleground or an arena or something, it can be hard to pick things out of a crowd. That's why we use macros and focus and all that stuff. It wouldn't, I don't think, hurt to allow for that. Obviously, nobody else will be able to see that, just me, but that's the kind of thing that they clearly have the technology to do already, I think. And that would alleviate some of the problems in this, or at least help us figure out when our pets are doing random things, like, kill command's not working, he's not in range of the target, I can't see him. Well, now, oh, hey, look, there's a little blue light on the wall over there. Whoops, get back here, Sparky. Okay. So,
well, what if we had an animation where we were throwing them the bone or something like that, so they were chasing it down, or a ball?
They do fetch, right? But I guess the issue is that you can't take time, you can't stop doing what you're doing to try and find your pet. You just got to keep doing it and press follow and then attack again and hope that unsticks him or whatever, no matter where he is. But if you could see him, then that would help Blizzard find bugs in their levels that our pets have to traverse. Anyways, you want to take 6 here?
Yeah. So let's see.
Talking about an example of mechanic simplification.
Simplification, yeah. SV lock and load proc fishing via black arrow slap trap spots. Boy, this is all sorts of.
Yeah, they're talking about delaying focus fire for wild hunt.
Yeah. Anyway, the response was getting rid of the lock and load trap was a really common hunter demand. Felt more annoying than skilled play to me personally. So
so he only really addressed the first one there.
Yes, he just addressed the first one.
Am I the only one that really liked that mechanic?
Which one? The
hunter traps giving lock and load.
Well, I think a lot of people liked it giving lock and load. I don't think they liked it sharing the cooldown with Black Arrow. I think that was sort of the annoying thing. Especially in PvP, if you happen to be survival in PvP, then you had to choose between the trap or Black Arrow. You couldn't have both. So I like decoupling the two so that Black Arrow is no longer linked to Explosive Trap. But I mean, as far as lock and load from Explosive Trap was fine. I'm sure they took it away because they didn't really want to see Explosive Trap be part of the rotation at that point.
But it wasn't part of the single target rotation. They could have done this by leaving it unlinked and allowing a trap to proc lock and load, but not if it's on a single target. Because really the only place that I really like this effect is when the boss calls in a horde of minions and you're just sitting there trying to kill them quickly. And the most fun thing in the world, because some of these raiding encounters have a huge number of ads, right? The most fun, like, remember those whelps? Actually, that was trash. But anyways, you throw down a trap, and all of a sudden, you've got 2 AoE caps. You've got your initial pulse, and then you've got your dot. And then on top of that, you're getting lock and loads constantly, so you're never spending focus on anything but multi-shot with Serpent Spread. That is why Survival kicks so much butt at AoE. One of the reasons. I think. Now, obviously, most people would just like multi-shot. That's the end of it. Drop a trap and then ignore the lock and loads. But occasionally, if you had a choice between regenning some focus to get out another multi-shot, or pumping in a couple of explosive shots at the boss while you're AoEing, you can make that choice. Maybe you do more raw damage pumping out a multi-shot, but you'll do more effective damage, as in better for the raid, by using that explosive shot on the boss. That's the kind of little skill tactic thing that's gone now. But to be honest, most people weren't doing it that way anyway, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
No, I mean, I would do that though sometimes. Like you said, in that AoE situation where you run out of focus from the multi-shots, but you had your explosive shot available for free. Why not? I would certainly. Or
even better, if the melee is assigned to AoE and the range is always on the boss, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not going to stop damage on the boss, but I'm sure as heck going to throw down a trap to help those ranged, because I'm going to be getting free lock and loads from it.
Yeah.
And that would get way more lock and loads than I would get from a Black Arrow.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can still get lock and loads from the frost traps now. So I mean, that even at an ad fight. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's
And
not
it's like
too
100% chance too. So I mean, you're guaranteed to get
that's...
lock and load from a frost. So if you have an ad fight, that's something you probably should do is just toss out a frost trap. And
that's good knowledge.
I mean, most bosses won't trigger the frost trap, but usually the ads in fights will do that.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's not too bad. The other thing is, I guess the main difference here is that lock and load is not as much of a DPS boost as it used to. It's a nice DPS boost, but it's not. And maybe now with the buff to explosive shot, it'll feel a lot harder. But they happen so frequently that and sometimes an additional one would overwrite the one that you already had going. I think I remember that happening a few times.
That used to be that, but that's no. Oh, I know what you're saying. In other words, you're
like if you don't use it right away,
yes, it triggers again.
Yeah, it lasts for just a little bit longer than the cooldown did, or the internal cooldown.
Well, it'll be interesting now because the force set bonus with our tier gear gives you if your survival will give you a certain percentage chance for you not to consume one of your charges of lock and load when it procs.
Neat.
So it'll be like getting an extra free shot in there, which would be nice.
Yeah. I'll go through 7 here. If the idea was for Stampede to only damage, shouldn't it be the same for Shaman? Just want to understand design decision. So his answer was, with Wolves, you get what you get. The problem with Stampede is that it became this metagame of configuring your stable. You can make this a pitch for a stable metagame, but what we were trying to do was let hunters use the pet they wanted. Okay. I understand what he's saying here is that the reason they took away our special abilities on Stampede, obviously the first one is that they were just really powerful. The second one is that, as an example, with Shaman, who can do a similar thing with Wolves, all they did was attack. And so they never had, or whatever, they couldn't choose which Wolves they had.
Right.
And we were in a situation where we were sitting there building the best possible stable so that when we hit that button, we hit really hard. And I knew there was a few situations where having a really strange pet in that stable would only, I guess this is more of a PvP thing, having like a strange pet in that stable would occasionally do things that just the other team was not at all expecting, on top of all the buffs and debuffs and whatnot. But I don't know, I kind of like that. I wish we could have maybe ended up with a situation where we could choose which pets come out of a Stampede somehow without having to modify what's in our stables, but the way it is now works fine too. They've in rating at least, they've gone ahead and undone that damage nerf, the 25% nerf or 75% nerf. So we're in 5.4, your Stampede will do 4 times as much as it does right now in live, and that is probably. Well, I don't know how that balances out against the way it used to be with all the special abilities, but anyways.
I don't know. I think we talked about it. I think it'll probably be more, but and like you said, the stable metagame I think was really more of a PvP thing, only because for PvE, for raiding, you tend to look at the buffs that you need to bring potentially for your group, and you end up stocking your stable primarily based on that first, and then.
And then you just happen to get them all when you hit your Stampede. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be in a situation where, okay, guys, I can either bring this or that debuff, which one is more important today, then you would bring that pet out primarily, and then when you hit stable, or when you hit your Stampede, then you'd get the other one for its duration, just as a nice little bonus. There was some nice synergy there, but yes, in PvP, I think it was a bit of a challenge. You've only got typically 3 players, right? So your buffs and debuffs are not going to be exhaustive. You're only going to have a couple of selected buffs, and the ability to pop out Stampede with the abilities of 5 separate pets, hopefully none of which overlapped with any of your pets, means all of a sudden you've got just about an entirely raid buffed arena team.
Pretty exactly. I mean, I imagine in PvP that was a pretty powerful thing, and even early on when you had the spirit beasts, I mean that was just.
Oh, that was all kinds of fun. That was mostly for dueling.
The healing that they did. I mean, yeah. So.
But it's just like, nobody expects the hunter to heal himself back up to full. While he's doing so much damage. Yeah.
So obviously, is the first time we've gotten ability like Stampede. So there was a lot of unintended consequences, unintended, benefits from it.
Yeah.
I just wish they'd fix the visual. That's the next thing I think that needs to happen. Like I said, there's so much going on in a raid that I really just don't. I hear it go off, but I don't really get to enjoy it all that much, seeing what goes on.
Yeah, what they should do, honestly, if they wanted to make this really fun, make them spawn by the hunter, make them have to run, but give them a slight run speed bonus. Give them like some effects behind them that indicates that they're dashing, and then make them bigger and put up a big cloud of dust that does nothing. So it just looks like, the hunter whistles, a whole bunch of pets appear next to him, and then you literally have a stampede heading straight for you. No matter where you go, they follow you. I would put up with a slight loss of damage just for that visual effect. Also, having them slightly bigger and red would be nice.
Yeah, increasing the size would be too. That would be good too.
Yeah.
I use the Dorman Grandeur worms, the giant ones.
Oh, nice.
From Dragonblight.
Hey, you can't
so
miss
yeah,
those.
yeah, you can't miss those. It's nice.
Yeah. In PvP, that would be awesome. Then nobody would be able to see anything. But I mean, we all use arena frames anyways, but still. So you want to get 8 here?
Yeah, so he's saying, then why do we still need to be a specific spec and use a specific pet to get Bloodlust? I don't know what the earlier context of that was, but the response was there are 6 other specs that bring Bloodlust. The Hunter version is just there as a last resort. We'd consider letting all Hunter specs bring any pet buff, though. I would be behind that. I'd love to see that the buffs all the buffs be available to every spec and not just limit some to Beast Mastery.
Yeah, me too. Beast Mastery is already ahead of the pack, pun intended, in terms of damage, single target and PvP damage right now. BBM is I don't know about 5.4. I'm not sure how it's all simming out yet, and we'll have to see what it looks like when it goes live. But right now on 5.3, for absolutely BM is the answer almost all the time.
Yeah,
The old justification, they never said it, but the way that I always read the situation beforehand is we know BM isn't quite up to snuff compared to Marks at the time, or Survival, whatever it was. Therefore, if you want to get this awesome debuff, you have to bring, I think it was a 3% crit or something, or 3% the rogue buff that was almost never there. We used to have to be BM in order to get that, and we would justify, even though we were doing slightly less damage, by the fact that we had this raid debuff that was pretty hard to get. And now that's not the case. We have a choice. BM is almost always the right choice for just about any situation right now. And if that's still the case, and it's also the only one that can bring Bloodlust, well, or all these other unique pet debuffs, then I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to give like some of the buffs that are just BM only, and find other pets that are non-exotic, and like I said, let Marksman and Survival bring them. And then just go ahead and keep exotic pets kind of like they are, where they have 2 abilities that they bring, and I think that's a nice benefit to being Beast Mastery, meaning you can perhaps have an easier time managing your stable and providing just a little bit more utility in that way.
Yeah.
With your exotic pets having a couple additional perks, and I like sort of going down that road, but like I said, because there are times where you might want to switch between Beast Mastery and something else, and all of a sudden you do that and you got exotic pets in your stable, or you're locking yourself out of ability to bring certain buffs, or if you happen to need Bloodlust, for example, because you don't have a mage or a shaman or someone that can bring that, well, all of a sudden you're locked into having to play Beast Mastery just to bring that one thing.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you're usually bringing that and you're only using that pet when you need to use Bloodlust, and then you're usually swapping to something else because you're short another buff.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through number 9 here. Okay, the question is, why wasn't Exhilaration buffed to compensate for the removal of Readiness? Now it's even worse than it was before. And I think what he means is, why wasn't it given charges like Deterrence was?
Right. Because remember, and I assume this was more of a PvP thing, where you would take Exhilaration, pop it, use Readiness, and pop it again for a 60% health.
Exactly, yeah.
30%.
Typically what you do is you'd Bestial Wrath, Readiness, Exhilaration. Sorry, if you can afford it, you'd kill command, Bestial Wrath. Well, Bestial Wrath is not on the global cooldown, I don't think. So you'd make sure you got off your signature shot, make sure you got off your Bestial Wrath, even if you're not in a CC. Sometimes, if there's any good reason to disengage, then you Deterrence, Exhilarate, and then Readiness. Then all that stuff will be off cooldown, and now you're invulnerable, you're moving faster, depending on how you spec your disengage. At the very least, your disengage is back up again, and now you might be closer to where you want to be. you can cancel your deterrence if this was just something temporarily, and you'd be able to exhilarate again. Now the other thing is that because exhilaration is such a weak effect on yourself, it's actually more useful when they're trying to kill your pet. Cower, let them cower, because pets typically have cornered. So you let them get your pet all the way down. You cower, and all of a sudden they start taking hits of like 1, and then you hit your exhilaration, and bam, back up to full. And nothing is more frustrating. And then you recall them, so they start walking away. But now that's just not possible. Now you get exhilaration once per cooldown. It's not. I guess even after the nerf now, the aspect of the Ironhawk is probably going to be the one that people take for PvP. It typically has been. It's a niche case, or if you like using an on-use heal, that you would take exhilaration, but I suspect Ironhawk is going to be the way to go for PvP. Anyways, his answer was, removing readiness was intended to be a nerf to PvP defenses. Took us a long time to get to Hunters PvP viable, but they are now. And before I read the rest of this, I'm just going to go back and say he's pointing at the finish line and then ignoring the race. So, regardless of whether exhilaration now has 2 charges or 1, Hunters are now viable, not overpowered. And that's what he was going for. Now, I can say that because exhilaration was always sort of a, do you want it, do you not want it, it really depends. There are equivalent or better options. It means now it's always a better option to not take exhilaration unless you have a very specific need for it in PvP.
Yeah, that's my sense too. You weren't going to take it in PvE, as it were. Like I said, you were going to go with Ironhawk or Spirit Bond, but probably even Ironhawk would still be the preferred talent.
I think even after the nerf, the reduction to damage taken is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So he then continues, along the way we had given lots of small PvP buffs that only became overpowered in Mists of Pandaria, probably because of the minimum range change. I don't get that. There were tons of little PvP buffs that became overpowered in this expansion that I can buy, but I don't think it's because of minimum range. I think it's because they made BM, they gave BM silencing shot and readiness. Those are the 2 reasons that people were playing Marks in PvP before. And now that, and BM even in the last patch of the last expansion, there were still people playing BM. And they were considered cheaters or cheese players or whatever, people that were not respected because they weren't playing the hardest possible spec with the highest possible rating. They were playing an easier spec with a lower high-end rating, but much easier to get to that than the other one. So they were considered bad players. Like Shem and BM Hunter was a typical 2s team that just was unbeatable. And not that they balanced around 2s, but the point is, the PvP buffs that became overpowered in Mists of Pandaria is 100% giving Beast Mastery readiness and I think Silencing Shot. I don't know when Silencing Shot became baseline, but I'm pretty sure it was in Mists of Pandaria. That is the only thing that changed. Everything else that he thinks, like minimum range and stuff, no, that actually didn't have that big an effect. If you were above a 1,000 rating, you were already not affected by minimum range. Okay, so
I'll take your word for it. Yeah, no, that does make sense. I agree that the readiness was, well, obviously it had a big impact because they removed it from the game now.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right, and it was almost enough of the best Marks Hunters before, when readiness was only for Marks, were still capable of getting really high ratings, but there were very few of them, and the vast majority, because it was kind of hard to control all of your abilities. Everybody else just had a point and shoot mentality, whereas we had to trap things, and we were limited by range of vision, and I suppose minimum range did have an effect back then too. So I'm not going to completely discount minimum range. It wasn't an effect, but I suspect the biggest effect was allowing BM, who could shoot around corners with kill command, to get silencing shot and readiness, which which made them viable in all situations, not just some. The last thing he said was movement was sort of a buff, but only to less skilled players, since skilled hunters always aspect twisted. I don't know if he's responding to the same question anymore, because this is true, but has nothing to do with exhilaration. But yes, less skilled players were somewhat affected, but skilled hunters.
Well, yeah, what he's saying was, when he's saying aspect, of course, he's talking about Fox and Hawk and.
I think he might actually be thinking they were twisting into Pack, or not Pack, but Cheetah, because he's talking about movement. And at that point, that's no longer something you do very often in PvP. That's something you do in raiding when you know you're not taking damage and you've got to get there and you've already used your disengage. Then you would switch over to Cheetah carefully so that you don't get stunned and just boot it. And there are and during that time, that means you're not that's only worth it if you can't do any meaningful damage. If you can, it's better to get there a tenth of a second slower and get the extra attack power on your shots. So I'm not really sure what he was talking about here, but that's what he said. You want to get number 10?
Yeah, number 10. So this was a good one, sort of a hot button one here. If we're still talking about Hunter button reduction, can I ask your thoughts on aspects? Necessary, or could they be baked in? And the Ghost Crawler's response was, they were never that interesting in my opinion. Keep pack as a toggle and lose the rest, I say. And then he put the little hashtag, not an announcement. No, it's not an announcement, but when you're the lead designer and you have actually some ability and authority to make that kind of change and that's what your opinion is, I mean, it's kind of sort of an announcement. If it smells like an announcement, if it sounds like an announcement, it just might be an announcement.
Yeah, you know what? Ever since they got rid of Fox, ever since they did that, I've felt aspects were on the chopping block. They don't do anything now. They let us choose between going faster or hitting as hard as we can.
Yeah.
And when we go faster, it's something that we can only do if we're extremely careful, because if we're ever not careful, we get dazed unless we take a big glyph, which would be at the expense of something much better. So typically, we just don't do it. Whether you're PvP, whether you're PvE, and I don't know whether this was publicly announced or anything, but I did get an answer on the question about remember that glyph that reduced the aspect of your pack range to 7 yards?
Yes.
The use case that they're thinking of is if you have to move a big group of ranged around in a tight group from one place to another quickly, and you don't want to have it affect the tanks or the healers or whoever's in melee range of the boss from getting dazed. I don't know if they have an encounter like that in the works, but that was their intent. The fact that it comes as a major glyph, which means we have to lose something pretty valuable to do it, means I don't think this is going to see very much playtime.
No, we don't think it's going to be used at all, hardly. I mean, it just seems so odd. It's so situational, and it's hard to understand, realize what the exact situation would be. And you have to know that situation is coming too, right? Because you have to prepare for it by having that glyph activated.
And you have to not have another class that can do it the same way better.
Yeah, true. Right. You don't want to have a druid there that can just do that roar or whatever that ability is.
Stampeding roar, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyways, that all said, this all ties back to aspects. I felt aspects are on the chopping block because, to be honest, right now I just don't change it very often. I have it keybound, not keybound, it's actually bound to a mouse button because of how often I used to change it back when we had a choice between Fox or Hawk, but that's not the case anymore. Now that we can always Cobra shot on the run or whatever, I just don't need to worry about it. So I don't know. If this happens, then I might not be that upset.
Yeah, I mean, the way they are now, I guess the other question is it worth them putting like their design time and kind of putting the thinking caps on and finding more creative uses for aspects than what they've done, or is it? My sense is they probably feel like this is a mechanic that's run its course, and that there might be other things to do. I mean, one of the abilities that folks really want is to have like the eyes of the beast back. Not that it has any, just because it's a fun, cool ability. Because it lets you take control of your pet. It was just kind of a neat thing to do, and so, but they could make an aspect that do that, but I don't know that they would do that. So I mean, it's kind of like
I would be happy if they give us a PvP aspect, an aspect that had a couple of different advantages for PvP at the expense of something else that was typically for PvE, and that would allow them to even better and even further balance between the two use cases of a hunter, without having to arbitrarily say this ability has a 75% nerf when you use it in an arena.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and the other thing to do with aspects too is perhaps take out the DPS component of it. I mean, that would probably and make it more fun, more utility. I mean, I think that would be the first step because no one just wants to sacrifice DPS in order to do something else, right? So always having that aspect of the hawk, which gives you that DPS bonus. So if they were to remove that and then come up with more creative things, that and then that might give them a little bit more room to work with, because then players wouldn't feel so bad about switching around for certain situations and certain utility. But if they have to give up DPS for it, then no one's really interested in doing that.
Well, here's
not for any long period of time.
Make Master's Call an aspect. Master's Call overwrites your aspect, gives you freedom for a couple of seconds, and then reverts back to your original aspect. Mm-hmm. And while you're under freedom, you don't do as much damage. Just little things like that. And anyways, we're not designers. All we can do is guess at what.
No, but like aspect of the Ironhawk, like I said, take the DPS component out of it, but maybe have an aspect that gives you damage mitigation. Like I said, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Damage mitigation. Choose between damage mitigation or mobility or some other useful thing that is either good everywhere or good in some places or good for certain encounters or good for certain types of PvP. Whatever. Yeah. I can kind of see what you're.
Yeah. There. Exactly. I mean, people. I think it would be hard to go back to Fox, for example. I
would not want to have to stop to fire Chimera shots. Sorry, it's just to fire Cobra shots. I've gotten too used to this.
But what I'm saying, where you maybe have an aspect of the Ironhawk that does damage mitigation and aspect of the Fox, which allows you to fire certain abilities on the move, and then, but I think what they want you to probably want to avoid is having to flip back and forth rapidly. Like too much. It's like they probably want you to turn one on for situation X, but make sure that that's a situation you're gonna be in for a reasonable period of time, and not a couple of seconds I need this, a couple of seconds I need that. I think they want to avoid that, and I think that's kind of an annoying mechanic myself.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, I think we're just about over time. Do you want to go ahead and screw up the outro?
Yeah, let's do that. We can do that.
All right. You have been listening to episode 184 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from OTPS, WoW Insider, and the Call to Auction Podcast.
And I'm Darkbrew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
And I'm Alessandra from the Hunting Party Screwed Up Podcast.
You can check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and if you don't use any of that stuff, we've got the link to the raw RSS feed on the show notes. And if you like us, don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or YouTube, especially one where you where you ask when the next call to auction is. Thanks for putting that in my lines, Allie.
No problem.
How many sportbacks you keep stapled?
Yeah. You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by professionals.
All right, stay thirsty, my friends, and remember to drink your dark brew lager.
For the Horde.
Oh, ouch. Yeah, so what they could do is give us an aspect of Tame Druid that when you're in PvP would allow you to momentarily mind control a Feral Druid. I keep on saying that should be... Oh, you know what? Okay.
And remember to spay and neuter your Feral Druids.
I already said that.
Yeah, but I sped over you.
Yeah, it's okay. So, what was the other thing I wanted to mention?
Nerf Canada?
No, we're done the show. I'm just trying to think. There's something I said I wanted to say in the post show, but I'm forgetting what it was. One of them was aspect of that, and then the other... it's gone. Anyways, yeah, so I can't do a real post show today. I've got people coming over, kids to watch and all that, but I will see you guys next week.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. Like I said, Sahara will be joining us. I think Arth will be back, so we'll have a full house next week, and we'll kind of get everyone geared up and get you primed for patch 5.4, which will be releasing on September the 10th.
Awesome. There's a very slight chance I may not be able to make it, but I'll let you know during the week.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Right. Yep, see you guys.
Bye.
I can jump shot, BM, MM, and SB. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, 'cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, cause I am hip-capped. Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Landing in the cave, dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadim, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malygos. We even killed a Kama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Yogg-Saron, Nefarian, Sartharian, Megtheridon, Sapphiron, Lucifer to Sulfuron,